You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We love MotoGP. Hello and welcome to Missed Apex MotoGP Podcast. This is a show put together by MotoGP fans pretending to be experts. We aim to have a race review show ready for a midweek commute. We may not be bike racers, but we love it. In a season that has seen more flip-flops than a seaside resort, we got served up a couple of flops as Pecco played nicely and Jorge Martin kept his cool to finally clinch the title. I am your host, Kyle Power, and today I'm joined in a virtual shed by some fellow MotoGP enthusiasts. It's our lovable co-host, Jules Seegers. How's it going, Jules?
Hi, Kyle. I thought I'd be a bit sad that the season's over and that we had to talk about the final race of the weekend, but afterwards, right now, I feel like a bit tired of it all, funnily enough, but still excited to talk about it.
Excellent. 40 races we have been harping on about and some other episodes as well. So it's a long old season, and someone who's been with us for most of this long old season is Danny Henney. How's it going, Danny?
Hey, Kyle. I'm gutted it's over. Always love a bit of MotoGP. Great to watch at the weekend, and can you believe it? It feels like it's flown by now when we look back over the season. We've had a lot of drama to discuss, been some good shows. So, yeah, let's get the winter over and bring on next season to see what the calamities shall ensue.
Absolutely. It's a long old season. I'll start off by thank you ever so much for our listeners who've been with us the whole way as well and keep sending in your feedback and stuff like that. That's been very well read by us. And so, final weekend. And so coming into the weekend, as we well know, after the Malaysian Grand Prix, Jorge Martin had a 24-point lead. He didn't have to do a right lot to secure the title this weekend, but there were a few little intriguing bits. So as always, we'll go through, we'll run through our little order, and we'll go into practice and qualifying. So practice was quite interesting. Bagnaia looked super strong, Jules. He just come out and he hit the deck. He hit the deck running, but he had this really weird fall, didn't he? Like due to finales after the practice starts. Like what on earth happened there?
Yeah, he was starting the weekend off like the only way that he could, and that's being the fastest, being on it from straight away. And it was at the end of the first practice sessions when they all get to do their first practice starts. And as we know by now, this season, all of a sudden, that's become a thing for Bagnaia. And he, again, had a bad one. So he kind of aborted his way onto turn one. But he started coasting on the racing line. And then Vinales came behind him. And he did have a good start. So he overtook Bagnaia on the outside of the curbs, and Bagnaia just freaked all of a sudden because he didn't expect that, which is a bit odd if you're on the racing line during practice starts. And he grabbed his front brake and he went down, which could have ended a lot nastier than it did.
My favourite part, though, was as soon as he hit the deck, he was already looking at Vinales as though he was going to give him a bit of a signal, should I say. But fair play to Pecco. He's obviously straight to the blame game that it was Vinales' fault. I actually don't think Vinales did much wrong. He was a bit rude going around the outside of him, but I don't think he was, as probably Pecco thought it was, he kind of swooped in front of him and put him off. It was a bit of a tit for tat, nothing really, but it got the weekend started.
Yeah, we've seen this we call it microaggressions really from Vinales previously in support classes as well. He doesn't like people messing around on the racing line, and I think this was a bit of a catching Pecco on the racing line. He was a bit of a rude swoop and cross in front just to let us know his displeasure at someone dawdling on a racing line. I don't think it was either their faults really, but afterwards when they both saw it, they were both pretty fine about it. They're like, oh no, we've talked and it's absolutely fine. You know, they're both decent guys. So another notable thing that we got from practice and quali was Aleix Espargaro in his final round. We must say that, the Solidarity Grand Prix of Barcelona, this should have been at Valencia. Obviously, all our thoughts are with people affected in Valencia. That's horrible what's happened there. But we've ended up in Barcelona as a result, a slightly cool Barcelona this time of year. But this is obviously Aleix's home track. The Espargaro brothers are from a few towns down from Montmello. My long-term partner is is from Moyet, which is a town just next to Montmello as well, and not too far away from the Espargaros town. So I've been around that region quite a lot. So they're very much local boys. And Aleix, as we saw, he win the sprint? He won the sprint earlier this year, but it was back there as well. He's absolutely rapid, and the Aprilia is rapid on the long corners. So it was quite obvious that in qualifying, Aleix was helping Martin out. He'd obviously made a pact that he was helping him out. So I personally think these tactics were quite wholesome and quite heartwarming, because, you know, when Aleix did his a really emotional retirement speech earlier on in the year, he was saying like Jorge was like a little brother to him and they've looked after him and stuff. So I thought it was quite nice. But Jules, what's your opinion on a riders helping each other out?
Not a big fan. I mean, I'm not looking for like all these kind of politics between riders and intense rivalries that end up in like, you know, unhealthy rivalries, so to say, like we've had in the past with mainly Rossi. But this is the other side of the spectrum, isn't it? I mean, I can appreciate like, oh, he's my little brother and everything, but then again, I don't know, man. It's a bit too cozy and comfy for my. I mean, you're still at the top level of sports, and you're competitors, and if you're not even in the same team, and then like way on beforehand stating, I'm gonna help this guy out, and I mean. To really, did Jorge Martin really need his help anyway? I mean, Espargaro has been like zoned out for like the second half of the season anyway. I mean, he's been cruising P17. At least that's how it seemed to me all the time. And then all of a sudden he was there. And I mean, hats off that he was, and it was his final race. I don't want to take away any of that, but it was a bit too, like I said, a bit too cozy and comfy for me.
Danny, like, we don't mind a bit of cozy comfy. I think Jules just is cold-hearted, isn't he?
A little bit. Me personally, I've lost many a pole in real life and the sim world through people playing them kind of tactics, and I absolutely hate it. I don't mind watching it a bit on the telly, but as someone who does racing at the lower levels like we do, I absolutely detest it. I think qualifying should be you're out there, maximum, no gimmicks, no help, no nothing. It's all about who can be the fastest. So, yeah, although I like a bit of warm and cozy now and again, not really when I'm watching a competitive sport.
Fair enough. I mean, in their defences, it wasn't like major helping out. You could see they were nodding to each other in the pit lane and be like, right, it was going to help out. And you could see this is going to be like a theme for him. But like Aleix qualifies second with like a blistering lap, an absolute blistering lap. Like Jorge Martin's on like the second row, and that you have to say job done. That's all he needs to do. Bagnaia, I mean, perfect as always. He's just gone out and has pretty much been the fastest all weekend. One really notable rider on the front row who was almost, which has helped, which is really interesting by Bagnaia, was none other than Marc Marquez, who was quite vocal saying like, I really struggle at this track. I've got a terrible feeling. No pace, like he was nowhere. His long runs looked awful everywhere, and somehow, like, it was almost like Bagnaia, you could see he wanted Marquez in the mix. He wanted fast riders up there, and usually Bagnaia will be playing all the games like running off track, going wide, inverted commas, so people aren't towing him. This time, he was almost encouraging it, dangling out some candy bars. It's like, come on, guys, who wants to tow? Like, come on, get between me and Jorge Martin. So he towed Marc Marquez around to stick it third on the grid, which he should have been like P12. Like, his younger brother Alex had been quicker than him all weekend, which, I mean, how many times do we get to say that? So that was really notable. And that was the first little signs that we saw. I'm like, oh, is Bagnaia actually going to start doing stuff? Like, he's trying to get people in the mix. Surely he's going to throw everything at it. And he said himself, I'm going to give it everything. So we'll talk about it a little bit later. We'll get on. But I was a bit disappointed when he actually ended up not doing a lot. But by the by. So qualifying, Bag does everything he needs to do. Aleix, brilliant front row at his final race at home with Marc Marquez in third. And Bastianini wasn't too strong. Like, Bagnaia needed Bastianini to be really up the grid a little bit more to be helping out a riding shotgun, because Jorge Martin had Morbidelli, his teammate, in there as well. not that Morbidelli's helped him out much this season, but this is where like you need teammates to come in and help. And you've got Marc Marquez, who, well, you couldn't really ask that Jorge Martin was relying on Marc Marquez. I don't think they get on that well, but again, I guess Spain versus Italy, I guess, that we've seen in the past. But yeah, Danny, like Bagnaia seemed to like be almost, he was like out there on his own in qualifying.
Yeah, the grid had a good prospect to it, really, when you look at it. You've got the championship contender on the front, got to win. You've got Aleix desperate to win his own race. You've got Marc Marquez, the chaos ensuing person usually in the races. And then you got Martin directly behind and Bastianini sniffing around as well. So I think the grid was set up nicely. And obviously it was interesting when they got turn one to see the tactics. But I think on the Bagnaia point, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because what games can you really play in the practice session other than the mental warfare? Qualifying, you can try and give someone a toe. But yeah, I think he was definitely, when you looked at the grid, it looked like he was kind of isolated out there on his own, and even more bringing it home that he was going to require some luck rather than tactics.
I would have been in the hospitality unit, replacing the chicken in the fridge with out-of-date chicken. I would have been doing all sorts of tactics. I mean, putting in, I don't know, absolutely taking all the sweets with the gummy bears out and replacing them with a sugar-free one, so you cause everyone's stomach chaos on the grid, Jules. I've been playing all sorts of dirty tactics.
Yeah, and in that aspect, it was different from last season. The season finale in Valencia, when the roles were reversed and Jorge Martin had a deficit to Bagnaia. And at that race, I don't know if you guys remember, during the practice and the quali sessions, Martin was all over Bagnaia's back. Every time Bagnaia would go out, he would go out immediately behind him, and he had the other Spaniards behind him, and it was like they were all on Bagnaia's tail. And this year, with the roles reversed, it was not like that at all. And you could see indeed Bagnaia, and he later referred to it like, I need bikes between me and Jorge. And indeed was Marquez and Morbidelli for a while, and it seemed to work. And on the other side, you had Espargaro and Martin pulling their tricks, and I thought that was kind of funny because it worked for Espargaro more than it worked for Jorge Martin, who ended up second row, and Espargaro on P2. But yeah, in that aspect, you could see, despite both of them being, applauded for their sportsmanship and their relationship between them, when roles were reversed, it did have a lot of a different dynamic last season.
Saying I don't think there was much he could have done in qualifying, actually thinking about it now, you brought the point up, Kyle. I would have liked to have seen him kind of rough him up on the warm-up lap. As they took off the grid, drop back, keep going in front of him, slow up, move him around the track, push him towards the edge. Looking at it, I think that potentially could have worked. Get him really wound up as he's coming to get into his grid slot, so he's frustrated going into turn one, misses a break, goes wide, drops down the pack. I think he certainly could have played them tactics. I don't think it's in his character when you look at how he is, but I think looking back now, I would have really enjoyed that. I like a bit of niggle, so I'd have loved him to have really roughed him up on the wall, and certainly I would have done. I'd have played every dick dastardly tactic I could have done going into the grid slots.
Absolutely. You're an Englishman. You love a bit of beef. A bit like me, sort of like coming in. Yeah, you like it when there's some niggles, and you're exactly right. I think I probably would have maybe tried to do the same, just do them ruffled. And as we saw in practice, like Jorge Martin was getting a bit frustrated, and we know he's prone to getting a bit emotional at this. So that's a little bit of weakness, and he's been pretty honest and open, saying it's been hard to deal with and the mentality thing. And there was an open door there. If Bagnaia wanted to start messing with his head a bit, he could have done. But as you say, I don't think it's in his style. But talking of the grid, let's go to the grid for the sprint review. Okay, so on to the sprint, and this was actually the most fun race, I think, out of the two that we got. Especially the first opening laps. There's a few little points I want to focus on for the sprint now. There was slightly different tyre choices. So Bagnaia went for the hard front, and it was a medium for Jorge Martin. They all went for the soft rears, but they all end up choosing the hard front for the main Grand Prix. So that looks like the better option. But I think Jorge Martin went for a more sort of safer-ish option. as we said, it's in Barcelona. They don't usually race at this time of year in Barcelona, and the temperatures are quite cool, and the track temperature was quite cool. And they were all moaning about the track surface as well, saying how polished it was and how slippy and tricky. So I thought Martin was going to play it really safe, not do anything and just dawdle around. But into turn one, he decides to try to send it on Bagnaia, and then Bastianini have a rocket start, came from nowhere and sends it on both of them. And I was watching between my ears. Once again, how many times have I sat on this pod this year and said this, like, surprised at how hard Martin decided to fight on those opening few corners, and particularly when Bagnaia has his teammate Bastianini, who's a loose cannon. Yes, he's fighting for P3 in the championship, but I don't think he really cares too much about that. Like, he can send risky moves. So Martin was kind of risking it all. And I think we were messaging Danny like during the race. We were just like, I'm surprised he's doing this. And the safest place he can be is probably out front. So do you think that's why he was fighting so hard? He just tried to get to the front and disappear?
Yeah, but as we were messaging, for me, if he could just get them points on the Saturday, he could wrap it up. He's only got to get there. I think that was in his head. He went for it in the early laps to try and get to the front, make the break, get the gap and get the job done. Certainly that's the approach I'd have took. And I think we've seen it from Martin, certainly in this run up to the end of the season. He's got way more aggressive on lap one, especially turn one, really sending aggressive moves. Really good to see. I really like it. And I think that was the approach he's probably thinking on the Saturday. I'll go for it. I'll give it a go. And if it doesn't work out, then I'll take my points, regroup, and I'll prepare for Sunday.
Yeah, and it's a valid tactic, but just if I put myself into his shoes, I was like, I basically have to wobble around inside the top 10 all weekend. Like, I'd just be waving everyone through. Everyone I thought was a danger, I'd be like, through, you crack on, lads. I'm quite happy sitting here, but you make a very good point, Danny. He had the chance to get it done and take all the pressure off for that Sunday. So of course you're gonna take it. And once he tried to get into the lead. Failed. He passed Bastianini and then just sort of stayed there. And Bastianini was like sort of hounding him. And I thought he tried to give chase for a while to Bagnaia, and then he kind of just rolled it off. As you said, it's tricky, it's cold, it's easy to tuck the front. So he was just happy sitting there. But one person he wasn't very happy, and I'd love to play a game of whose fault is it?
Whose fault is it?
So whose fault was it? Turn 3, lap 1. Marc Marquez and Pedro Acosta come to blows, and it rips the front of Acosta's fairing off. And this is Jules, and this is actually going to have quite a ramification for Acosta's final championship standing. So, Jules, whose fault was that?
I'm going to say Marc Marquez. And, at first I thought Acosta not very smart because he's on the inside of turn 3. And he's on the curbs even, so he's not even on the tarmac. And at first I thought, that's not very smart. But then, it's the start. It's the first couple of corners, and guys are gonna be there, And being Marquez, being so experienced, and you feel, you hear, you probably see in the corner of your eye, okay, he's there. Give him a bit more space, give him a bit more space, especially in that turn. Yeah, I mean, you can go a bit wider there and have a better exit. So, but maybe that's my love for the sport, that want to have good battles and want to see this guy up front, because the weekend in Malaysia wasn't Acosta's weekend either. So yeah, so I'm going to say Marquez.
Danny, tell him it's wrong.
You are wrong, Jules. Very wrong. It was Acosta's fault. Not like bad mistakes like some of them we've seen in this season. It's not a Morbidelli at Silverstone level mistake, but Acosta, he was on the inside. He weren't far enough alongside the rider in front. He's got his nose in. He's had his fairing took off. If he was that far along, it would have collided. They'd both hit the deck. So in my opinion, although I think it was more a racing incident, I think more to blame would be Acosta because he's not far enough alongside. And equally, it's interesting you talk about understanding the situation you're in. Acosta knows it's Marquez. He's not going to just open the door and go, yeah, I'll run wide, son. You carry on up the inside to turn 4 on a track he doesn't run well at, knows it's hard to overtake, and he wants to get involved. So I just think a little bit on Acosta, he could have been a little bit smarter in that instance, knowing who he was up against.
Well, for balance, I'm going to slightly disagree with both of you. And I'm semi more agreeing with Danny, but I think in Acosta's defense there, I think he was clearly ahead and Marquez was behind, and Acosta took more out of turn 2, the left, and then flipping it over to the right, so he was tight on the inside, whereas Marquez, if you look into turn 1 in sprint, Marquez makes a complete Horlicks going into turn 1, gets it, almost loses it on the brakes, and I thought he was going to harpoon Bagnaia, so I was like, oh no, this is going to be really bad. Imagine the political fallout if that would have happened. So Marquez ends up going wide, which then means he has to cut turn 2 really tight, which puts him on the outside for turn 3. So actually, he ends up falling behind Acosta, and then he's actually overtaking Acosta again around the outside and pulls in across. I think this is a bit more like the Bagnaia versus Alex Marquez incident in Aragon, where
let's not
Marquez kind of controversial. But like where Marquez kind of knew Acosta was going to be there, and I think Marquez maybe should have allowed a little bit more room, because Marquez was the one who had vision of the situation and knew the bike was on the inside, whereas Acosta was just leaning off, didn't really know that Marquez was there. So I think I definitely agree. Racing incident. I don't think it deserves a penalty at all, but I think Marquez maybe could have allowed a little bit more room there. And this is exactly what I think about the Bagnaia Aragon with Alex Marquez incident as well. The one overtaking, who's leaning the bike across somebody on the inside, they're the one who has the vision of the situation. They're the one who knows what's going on. So Marquez said something similar himself. He was like, racing incident, but if anybody could have avoided it, it was probably me, which is quite a nice admission. But I feel a bit sorry for Pedro because he was looking really strong again all weekend. And with the other KTMs like nowhere, and he was looking an absolute dead cert for P5 in the championship, it all ended up going a bit wrong. But it was a shame that we didn't see him at least try a couple of laps with no front fairing. I would have loved to see that, but he just didn't even attempt it. It's like in this modern day MotoGP that's so aero dominant, it wasn't even tempted. But I thought it would have been quite cool if he goes wrong. So back to the race. I think we've all agreed there that it was my opinion is the correct one. So we'll move on. Bagnaia disappearing off at the front. Jorge Martin fighting Bastianini quite hard, who's a bit of a loose cannon there, and it was all brewing up nicely. And if you watched on TNT Sport, they called it quite well. They know that Bastianini was coming closer and closer, and because Martin gapped him for a bit, but Bastianini managed to come back, and heading into the final lap, you knew Bastianini was going to have a try, and he sends it up the inside of turn 5. I don't know why. I had a horror vision that he was just going to lock the front and take them both down. Now that would have been very, very controversial if that would have happened. And again, you can't really slight Bastianini for trying it, because again, he really had nothing to lose. He's done his teammate a solid there. So Jules, like, I'm not surprised he sent it there, but the way he sent it and leveled the bikes and still tipped in, I thought that was asking for just to lock the front and skittle them both off.
Very much so. It was like my heart skips a beat moment, because you know what's on the line. Because, you know, if he goes down and he takes Jorge Martin with him, it would have massive consequences for the Sunday race, of course. And he goes off the racing line into turn 5, which is the turn where Bagnaia in the sprint way back in May or June, dropped it on the last lap while leading. And it's one of the few left-handers. So the tire on that side is relatively cold still. So it was such a risky move going off the racing line. And I was very surprised that he neatly made the turn. He didn't even go a bit wide. He just neatly made the apex, kept on the inside. And it was such a clean move. So it was relieved, and also, ballsy move, Enea. And you could see Jorge Martin like being surprised and like shaking his head a bit, which is, kind of the natural response nowadays when you're being overtaken. But it was really ballsy, and I thought, this is the the wingman, the teammate that Bagnaia could have used a bit more often this season.
Absolutely. And Danny, that was disappointingly clean if you're a Bagnaia.
Yeah, funnily enough, I was watching it when he went for the move, and I actually thought someone was in Bastianini's overalls or something, because he's not really been took shots like that all season. Obviously, they had a bit of a coming together at Mazzano, but with the predicament Bastianini's in, I'm quite surprised how aggressive he was in that race to try, and whether he was doing it for himself, trying out Pecco. He's lost the ride. I was really surprised he didn't just roll it off and drop back to about 10th and go, I'm out of here, guys. You've took my bike. You've took my ride. I am not helping you whatsoever. But fair play. He stuck for it. He went for it. And the risk, yeah, very high. I think we all were watching it going, I think he's going to tuck the front here. That's a bit late going into that corner with the risk you've got. But what did worry me is when he did make the move, as Jules says, with Martin shaking his head, because I thought, uh-oh, that's some frustration here for Martin now. He's in a real predicament. If he starts to get frustrated, and he kind of did what I was expecting Pecco to do on the warm-up and kind of rough him up, Martin could easily get overexcited, go in down the back straight into the tight left, drop it. And how many times have we seen riders hit the deck there?
Yeah, loads. And to quote a saying from you in one of the previous episodes, I think Bastianini was playing Martin with his championship leader card. So Martin had it all to lose, and Bastianini was always going to throw something up the inside. And to answer your sort of point there of like, what was the point in him making the risk? Because, you know, he's been sacked by the team already. I'm pretty sure they would have had a very nice financial incentive for him to, one, get P3 in the championship, and two, if you help your teammate win the championship, there's going to be some penny sweets in it for you, shall we say, at the end. I'm pretty sure he was going to get a fun-sized Mars bar or a packet of Haribo if he did well. So, you know, it wasn't all for nothing. But, yeah, I think he did Bagnaia a solid there and was a really good move. And he knew that if you're Hoy Martin and you see a wheel appear on your inside, you're just going to jump out of the way. Like, I'm surprised he lent on him so much. If I would have seen that, I would have just picked the bike up and be like, hey, you crack on, Sam. I was just like, you go, I'm not going to fight. But as Jules said, yeah, when he shakes his head, he generally seemed like he was a little bit rattled by it. So, but he didn't go down. He ended up P3. So Bagnaia did everything he needed to do by winning the race. He had his teammate Bastianini in second and Martin in third. So he gets the gap down to 19 points. And importantly also for Bastianini, his P3 in the championship as well. So this is what he's fighting for. He then opens up his lead over Marc Marquez to 5 points in the battle for third, which I don't think even really care about that too much. I mean, Marquez come straight out and just said he didn't care. He basically didn't really care about P3 in the championship. But yeah, I'm pretty sure there's some financial incentives there. So that wraps up the sprint, and it set us up for a final race showdown, which this championship so deserved. It would have felt wrong if it didn't go down to the final race. So let's get on to talking about that right now. And unfortunately for the season that we've had, it has been such an epic season of U-turns, up, down, flip-flops. This was a bit of a flop, really. It never really properly kicked off. And, I'm going to blame Pecco Bagnaia for that, because I'm pretty sure if he hadn't have binned it in the sprint in Malaysia, it would have been way tighter on the points. And I think Jorge Martin would have had to get his elbows out a little bit more, but he didn't. But let's start off by giving some praise. All hail the new champ. We have a new champion in a crazy sort of scenario and situation. And I've been sitting on this pod all year saying Ducati aren't going to let it happen. They're going to do something nefarious. They're going to knob him over or do something, you know, like the dodgy tyre in Qatar last year. Something will happen. And there were so many ways that Ducati could do something to stop this happening, and they didn't. And Martin played it absolutely solid. He looked a little rattled in practice, Jules. Like, he was really solid in the sprint. And then in this race, he did exactly what he had to do. Solid as hell.
Yeah, he started the weekend a bit scruffy, and after the Friday, or even after the sprint, he said that he had struggled with getting the feeling up until the sprint, and then during the sprint he all of a sudden had it. And you could see even during quali when he was trying to get help from Espargaro, but it didn't really work out, and he had to abort 2 of his 3 flying laps in Q2. But he was so relatively calm as you can be in this situation. But he said, I didn't eat for a whole day on Saturday, and that's what I like about Martin so much, that he paints a very human picture of himself with
transparent and honest,
flaws and weaknesses, and he talks about how he tries to improve himself as a on the human side. And I just really like that very much, because it comes across to me as a very 2020s way of going about racing, instead of the, dare I say, more toxic, more machoism title winners we've had in previous decades. And I find it really refreshing, and it's it's easy to say it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy, but in a way, that's what it is, isn't it?
What a great story it is, though, on the satellite bike, isn't it, for Martin? Absolutely. And I was unsure which one I wanted to win it more. Obviously, I like the fact that, and I'm a big believer in the person who wins the most races really should be the deserving champion, as Carl knows very much.
You would say that.
Yeah, but I think it was just a really good sight. It was amazing to see that the satellite team has beat the big team, with the bikes, genuinely. And as you say, Kyle, Ducati not doing any underhand tactics or anything. But for me on Sunday, what impressed me the most with Martin, although it was a snooze fest, they could have put up on a bit of a better show. He put in a mature ride. And if I was going to sum up his season, it wouldn't be, and it sounds quite bad for him, but I wouldn't say it was ecstatic or revolutionary. He was mature and consistent. And for me, he ended the season exactly as he has been at every single race so far.
Yeah, because he's been framed as, oh, he's a crazy guy, and he either goes fast or he crashes. And I don't know if that's really fair. I understand where that's coming from, and maybe especially after last season. But this season, I mean, he's crashed maybe 4 or 5 times, and that's like half the times Bagnaia has gone down. And I, like Danny says, he's been going about it in a very mature way, and he, at the same time, being honest about his doubts and his nervousness and the tensions. When he gets on the bike, all of that disappears. And he's doing a great job. And do you need the most race wins to be a deserving champion? That's maybe a different debate. I'd like to have one day, but he's been. If you go about it in this way, you deserve it 100%.
Yeah, that's hard to argue against. I think consistency pays off, and I see Danny laughing because we've personally fought against each other for championships, and Danny's won loads more races than I have, and I've managed to nab a championship off him. That's always going to run deep. Let's look at some of the mistakes Martin has made this year. The ones I can think of off the top of my head was crashing out of the lead of Jerez, crashing out of the lead with 2 laps to go at the Saxon Ring. That was the big one for me, and possibly making that strategic error in Misano. But apart from that, he's been pretty solid when he decided to pit when it rained. But apart from that, he's been really solid. And I think we've said on this pod a few times this year, he's matured this year. Whereas last year, when he was in second and he was still pushing really hard to get the win, we'd seen him go down a couple of times and carry on pushing. Whereas this year, I think he kind of learnt to accept when the win wasn't on, he'd roll it off. Instead of over pushing and chucking it down the road, he backs it off and cashes the points, Danny.
Yeah, I would say last season we had question marks, didn't we? We knew he had the speed. He took it close. The big question mark was, can he learn from the mistakes from last year to be able to battle for a championship and get it over the line? And boy, did he answer them questions. He learned fast. He was consistent. He stopped making silly mistakes. He focused on the bigger picture rather than the here and now. super impressive. And as I say, he answered the biggest question everybody has. What a lot of riders have with talent, there's always that, can they go to the next level? But they need to learn from the mistakes. And he did exactly that. Super impressive.
Yeah. And we've touched on it already as well. Like, massive kudos to Ducati, like huge kudos to Ducati for being fair in this. And it wasn't that they didn't do anything like underhand or nefarious or anything like that. They actually had the opportunity to give Pecco a slight advantage in this, and it was the new chassis, which they could have given him, and he said he preferred and he liked, and they refused because they couldn't give it to everyone. So hats off. That's just like that's a complete a tangible display of the fairness that they've gone about their racing, and they honoured their word right to the very end. And I still thought they were going to do something. I don't know why. I was semi-paying devil's advocate on the show, but generally there's a little bit inside me. I was like, surely they're not going to let this happen. But they did, and they took it really well. So hats off, Jorge Martin. In my opinion, a thoroughly deserving champion. And as Jules said, I like the fact that he's quite transparent and quite open about it. And as Jules said, previous sort of macho champions, there's always a thing from like Marquez is never show weakness or strength. Like when he's injured, like never show weakness or strength to try to do that. So Jorge Martin is quite open and transparent, and I quite like that, Jules. I think that's an endearing feature of him.
Yeah, and I think it's I don't want to get too parental about things, but the example he sets, like winning a championship from an underdog position without using all kinds of elbows or dirty racing or dirty tactics or pulling everything out of the closet to get the win. He really kept the fight to his how do I say this? His own abilities. He didn't need or use any dirty things. And what I find so impressive about it and setting a great example is after Mugello, when he heard he wasn't going to get the Ducati seat for 2025, that must have been so painful for him, because I remember we talked about it in the pod back then, and we kind of set the timeline of how things happened, and that he left on Sunday evening having a verbal agreement about you're getting the seat. And then the next day, Marc Marquez has pulled his strings, and all of a sudden he wasn't. And then quickly signing for Aprilia. And I saw that image today somewhere on Twitter, I think, when he's standing next to Espargaro and Davide Brivio, Aprilia. And it was like, this is a happy moment, but you could just see in the eyes of Martin, he was just empty, because he must have been heartbroken. If you can get on top of that and play it so cleanly and so focused and so consistent, it's not my native language, so I can't use a lot of superlatives. But he's so deserving of this.
What has happened to you two? Oh, he's so nice. Oh, he's this. Show me a ruthless world champion who's going to go out there and going to come back next season and dominate. Yes, it's nice to have nice riders who have nice personalities, but for the love of God, don't show no weakness, no nothing. If your arm's hanging off, you don't let anybody know. You go out there, you play the mental game, you say, I'm here, if I had one leg, I'm still going to beat you. That is what I want to see in a world champion, someone who's on top of the world, the big rooster in the hen house, if you will. My only concern with Martin, funnily enough, joking aside, with that he is nice, is show me a multiple world champion who's really nice. Because most of the time, multiple world champions are ruthless. Absolutely ruthless. They might seem nice off track, but they will do whatever it takes to win out on the track. So that's my only concern we have with Martin. Is he a one-shot wonder, or can he go on and do it again? And the jaw is out for me at the minute, based purely on the fact he's not nasty enough from what I've seen.
That's a great point, Danny. And that leads us on perfectly to the second topic that I wanted to pick on today. And that was, should Pecco have played more dirty? Because I was surprised at how not ruthless Pecco was. And I actually think this is, I'm going to agree completely with you here, Danny, actually. Like, I thought I was actually a little bit disappointed with how honourable and how gentlemanly Pecco was about it after the sprint. He said he was going to give it everything, and where everyone were like, surely he's going to try something to back up. He's got nothing to lose. You've got nothing to lose. You might as well try to ruffle his feathers or to do stuff like that to back him in the pack, shove him off track, do whatever. And he did none of it, Danny. He did none of it. He was just a consummate gentleman the whole way through, very disappointedly, in my opinion.
Yep, 100%. And I tell you who's a great example of this, who I can think of. Some people may disagree. Casey Stoner. What a rider Casey Stoner was. But if he'd have been a bit more nastier, especially when he was battling with Rossi, he could have been a 3-4, potentially a 5-time world champion. He's got the 2, but he was just too... And it's a very good trait, don't get me wrong. It's just a personal bit. I like Dick Dastardly more than I do Penelope, whatever she's called, Wedge Dinner Racing. But he was just too nice for his own good. And Pecco's got exactly the same character in him. I'm actually a bit surprised how many championships Pecco has for how nice and respectful he is. But he just give me something to give me a bit of hope that we're going to see a bit of spice.
Like in my own racing, like I really admire Pecco. Yeah, I'm saying I want to see a bit more underhand and dirty tactics. I want that as like a spectator. I mean, I pride myself in my personal racing of trying to be as clean and gentlemanly as possible, but I'm not fighting for world championships. If I was fighting for world championships, maybe I would be a little bit more underhand. But Jules, you have to admire Pecco for it and the way he conducts himself. He was a proper gentlemanly about it. But surely even you, you like going about things in a very gentlemanly manner. Surely he should have at least tried something. Disappearing off into the distance, he just left everything down to fate, where I think he could have maybe created some of his own fate.
Yeah. In defense of that, I think two things. One, it has proven a couple of times this season already with Bagnaia, but also with Martin. If you take it a bit more slow and a bit more easy, you're prone to crash a lot more than when you're riding at 100%. Because I believe all of the unexplained crashes Bagnaia has had, so the times he didn't crash with Marquez brothers or get sandwiched by Binder and Bezzecchi, it was like, I can't explain, and it was like I was taking this turn just as careful as I could because I was afraid to crash. The thing that happened in Malaysia. So you can't ride these machines at like 90 or 80% apparently. And the second thing is, I mean, what are you going to do? You're a motorcycle. You're not a car. You can't pack up the whole pack in all the slow corners because you're pretty easy to overtake if you're going to ride slowly and you're going to cool your tires. So what can you do? And who's gonna come in between Bagnaia and Martin? Because Martin had to finish 10th or lower for Bagnaia to win it on Sunday. I mean, which 10 riders or 9 riders were that gonna be? So I don't think he believed that would have worked anyway, and he probably wanted to go out on the most respectable way for him possible, and that was to get the double this weekend.
Yeah. Granted, he kind of done, but what he could have done, he could have really parked it on the apex and made the other riders either ride into his back wheel or bump his back wheel as a classic tactic, or he would have let them through and then jammed it up the inside in a really hard move him offline onto the dirty bit, ruffle his feathers, and then let him do the rest for you. Get him riled, get him ruffled, back him into the pack where you've got your Binders, your Acostas, the headbangers, the nutters, everything back in the pack. Get him involved in all of these super aggressive riders and then let him make his own mistakes. Just put him in that situation. So if I'm Pecco, Danny, I think I've given him too much of an easy ride. Surely I wanted to get him flustered and make his life absolute hell.
100%. I'd have done exactly as you just said, Carl. I would have backed it up and I would have on purpose made sure I left a really enticing open door on the inside. And when he went for it, I would have gone as late as I could on the brakes to force him and kind of say, nope, not this time, son. And I'd have dragged him into deep water till he had to make a move which I was pretty sure he was going to outbrake himself and go off into the gravel. Now, I'm not sure what turn I would have done it. I'm not quite as clever as these guys, but I would have dragged him into deep water and I'd have really played with him, let him have it, shove it straight back up the inside of him, potentially let him go at turn 4, down to turn 5, straight back underneath, ruffle his feathers, let him have it. Till you get him that frustrated, he's going to make a mistake, because the only thing what was going to save him is he either hit the deck or he went that far off. It was going to put a good chunk of riders in front of him and he was going to struggle to get through that pack in the time available. But big task, weren't it, really? For saying he had to finish 10th or lower, it was always going to be a big task. But do something, because nothing is given to you in this life. Life is tough, especially in sport. Don't wait for it. Go and take it.
Absolutely. So one fly in the ointment for all of this. There's all very well and good me saying he should have backed him up and himself and everything. There was one fly in the ointment which Pecco himself put there. That was Marc Marquez. He got him onto the front row. And again, we've seen this year. From nowhere, he reckons his crew chief, Frankie Cardacci, found something in the warm-up. They went back to their settings. They were using an FP1 and voila, all of a sudden front running pace. So Marc Marquez is there. And you know, if Marc Marquez has a sniff of getting a win in his final race for Gresini, he's going to take it. So, and another notable mention we said already, Martin has his mate Aleix up in the group who was fighting really hard and doing him a solid by preventing Bagnaia's own teammate Bastianini from ruffling up Martin and stuff like that. 'Cause I'm pretty sure Bastianini would have had some financial incentives and orders just to rough Martin up as much as you can, disturb him, freak him out a little bit. But Aleix Espargaro was doing this. Obviously, Bagnaia doesn't have that much information. I don't think I see him look behind once. He just got his head down. I think his tactic the whole way through was just get out there and win it. I would like to see some games played. But with his attitude and getting on this, I might say something a bit controversial here, but I kind of got the impression, I actually put down in my notes, it seemed like he didn't want to win that badly. It seems like he was totally resigned to finishing second. Like all weekend, he said he was going to give everything, but he was so calm about it and so accepting, Jules, that I don't know. That for me, you know, you're a double world champion and you're going to be your championship's going away. He seemed a bit too okay with it.
Probably seemed, yeah. I mean, you're crashing out of the Malaysia sprint, and you know after that weekend, your deficit towards Martin is so big that it's not very realistic, knowing that the two of you have been the fastest by far in races, and a miracle needs to happen for you to win. So I can imagine he's been resigned to a certain degree. But then on the other hand, what as we already mentioned, his personality, coming out to the media and say, I don't want to win it in any other way. I never ask for any help, no team orders, not from any other riders. And to me, that says a lot about how he wants to be remembered as a champion, as a title winner, and the way he wins it. And we, in the past, in our episodes, we often refer to him not getting dragged into the Rossi versus Marquez, Stoner, etc. That polarizing atmosphere. And I think he saw what that does, and how many hearts you win, but also how many people you lose by going about it in that way. And so I don't think the way he comes across, what he says, he will never be that rider unless, and that's what I wonder, what if Marquez is the man to beat next season? And the only way to beat him is by, using Marquez tactics. And I do wonder whether it's Martin or Bagnaia or someone else, if this, as I said, 2020's kind of, I don't know if I can call it Gen Z mindset, but how long is that going to stand if a guy from the old school, tops the standings again?
Oh, so you're saying get rid of this utter woke nonsense, Jules? Is that what you're saying? We are joking, of course. We are absolutely joking, but no, that's a good point. I like the fact that he does everything prim and proper, and he has kept himself out. One thing that you don't want to keep out is our Twitter page. If you've listened this far, how about giving the page a bit of a follow at Missed Apex Moto on Twitter, or emailing in some more feedback or maybe some show requests. We will be back in the off season. We will be producing some off season content. So how about send some suggestions in to missedapexmoto@gmail.com. Now let's wrap up this race review with a few notable mentions. First off, we've already semi-mentioned him, but the Acosta versus Binder battle for best of the rest. P5 in the championship, top non-Ducati. Now, Binder ends up snatching this right at the death. And I don't think that this was really deserved in any way whatsoever. So Acosta's binned it loads. And he said, he had the unfortunate coming together with Marquez in the sprint, which wasn't Acosta's fault. And then he's also mentioned the mysterious brake issue, Danny. But Binder just snatches it and gets some points, but Acosta was nailed on for that. And in my opinion, Acosta's made the other KTM riders look a bit stupid this season.
Yeah, that was what I was requesting to say. Binder and Miller have been missing all season. Acosta has been incredible at times, looked like a rookie at others, but he's really brought a buzz and excitement to the paddock. I wasn't sure if he was going to. We're watching him in the lower categories. It always looks like a character, but obviously there's always a question mark. But he has looked right at home from day one, had some incredible rides, really put the others to shame on a bike that is nowhere near the bike really, because just look how his teammates been doing. And I think it was a travesty that he's had it stole off him at the last round of the season, because I was all geared up to sit here and go, he is my arguably rider of the season, a rookie finishing 5th, not on the same bikes, and it just a bit of a sour taste that he's had it stole off him in the last round.
Yeah, I have to agree, because he's just set the world afire. He's got more podiums than I think all the other KTMs put together. He's been absolutely solid. Jules, do you think it's fair? I mean, nobody really remembers 5th place in the championship, but top non-Ducati, I think, is quite a bow to have in your cap.
In this era, it is, of course. And if you can get that position in the rankings as a rookie, and defeating the two factory team riders, that's an impressive thing to show up at Christmas dinner. So it was really harsh, because he entered the weekend 2 points clear of Binder. Then he obviously got knocked out by Marquez in the sprint, losing possible points. And then it must have been like the last corner or the penultimate corner of the Grand Prix on Sunday when Binder overtook him. Or maybe Binder overtook Bezzecchi and he was already past.
Bezzecchi overtaking Acosta, I think. They were having a bit of a ding-dong the last few laps.
Yeah, that was it. And that way Binder finished 2 points ahead eventually it was harsh on him, because like Danny says, I mean, he's been such an impressive rookie, but he seems like a really cool guy in the paddock to have around this sport, and I think that's really positive.
Yeah, and I'm expecting big things from him next year, and hopefully KTM can continue their upward trajectory. But I think arguably KTM were stronger in the last couple of years, not this year. Like the last couple of years, they've actually been stronger. This year, they've fallen off the ball a bit. And I think it's only really Acosta that's been keeping them in and relevant, really. He's been like the lead KTM pretty much almost every weekend, pace-wise, and putting that bike where it shouldn't really be, really. As Danny said, look, his teammate, like Fernandez, has been nowhere, absolutely nowhere. So notable mention, Acosta got robbed at the end, but one thing that is quite interesting, but he mentioned this afterwards. He said he had this weird brake issue in the Grand Prix where he said he wasn't getting enough power out of the brakes and really struggling. And he mentions, so we can clarify something that we spoke about on the pod back at, was it round 3 or 4, which is Cota, where Marquez binned it out of the lead. And he said he had this weird braking problem. He said it was kind of a mistake, but I had a weird braking problem. And Acosta kind of mentions this. And he was like, Mark had a similar issue. early in the season where you're not getting the power out of the brakes, and he thought he was going to tuck the front constantly. So I think if Marquez hadn't had that, he would have won Kota and then won the championship. I think that's guaranteed. We can all agree that, can't we? Right, moving on. So sticking with Marquez as well, there are other notable mentions here, and the epic, the most prestigious place in the whole championship is P3, obviously. And so Marquez, in his battle with Bastianini for P3 in the championship, ends up coming out on top because Bastianini, a bit frustrated with Espargaro's tactics of trying to ride shotgun for Jorge Martin. Bastianini had a bit of a bad Sunday, bit of a scrappy Sunday. I think he ran off track at one point. And a bit frustrated and lost his P3 in the championship, which all the commentary on TNT were pretty sure that he had some sort of financial incentive in his contract to get that as well. And Todozzi kind of was laughing in one of the interviews, kind of inferred the same. So yeah, you're Bastianini, you're on the second year on the factory bike. I mean, last year he spent a lot of the season injured. This year he doesn't have too much of an excuse. You're on the best bike out there. You've just been beaten to P3 in the championship by a 1.5-year-old bike and a real small privateer team. Yikes, you're not going to be feeling too great about that. And you just have to say that it kind of justifies Ducati's decision not to keep him, really. Sort of, Jules, like, I don't know, do you disagree with me in any way?
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't showed a lot and consistently enough for someone to doubt that decision or to second guess that decision. And his frustration after the race on Sunday must have also been fed by, you're being ditched. There's no other factory team picking you up. And knowing you're going to end up in the second KTM team next to Maverick Vinales, I mean, it's a downgrade and a half, isn't it?
I think when you look at the results, though, now when you look back at the decision what Ducati took to drop him, even looking at all the riders involved, even with Martin, Marquez, and Bastianini, when you look at the facts and figures, Marquez has pretty much won the same amount of races as Martin, who's took the championship on a 1.5-year-old bike. And when you look at how many points he's off, just over 100 points, he's hit the deck a lot more times than what they have when he's chucking the bike. If he would have, as Carl said, stole Kota, Harep, if he'd have had a bit better luck, because he was looking quite competitive there, if he could have actually found some blooming form at the Saxon ring where he usually dominates, he could have been right in there. So when you look back at although it looked a bit strange at the time, I think Ducati have made the total right decision currently, even though they've lost the one plate. And I think Bastianini, unfortunately for him, has just been up against two far better riders over the course of the season.
Yeah, that's hard to agree. And he's been a bit of an enigma at times, his fabled late race pace we've seen. But wow, that gas KTM next season, they have two of the biggest enigmas on the grid of their riders. Maverick Vinales and Bastianini as teammates. I mean, flip a coin. He goes, I doubt they'll have both of them turning up for any weekend. It seems because Maverick is just a total enigma. You don't know if he's going to turn up, be unbeatable, or turn up and be nowhere. And we've seen a little bit of that from Bastianini as well. So that's going to be interesting to see how that pans out next year. So all in all, at the end of all of that, Jorge Martin ends up winning the championship by 10 points. Marquez, a whopping 106 points further back. Maybe my delusional visions, Marquez being in the fight, was a bit optimistic. So he's 106 points back, but importantly, 6 points clear of Bastianini. So what a title. I don't think we got the final race that the championship kind of deserved. It deserved the final race. We thought we were going to get an epic race right down to the last lap, but it never quite happened. But what a championship nonetheless. And as ever with this show, we like to finish up by giving out some awards. So we'll start with Rider of the Weekend. Danny, who was your Rider of the Weekend and why?
I'm going to go for Aleix Espargaro. Last race, put in a really good performance in both qualifying and the race. Going to be a shame to see him off the grid.
Lovely. Yep, I love that one. That's warm, fuzzy feeling territory. Jules, who was your Rider of the Weekend?
I can't see I can choose any other rider than Jorge Martin. And we have been, lauding his performances a lot in this episode, so I won't elaborate a lot on it. But, again, being at a satellite team and doing this under all the pressure, your first time, hats off.
Yeah, bang on. And to complete it and to complete the warm, fuzzy feeling territory, my ride of the weekend, I'm actually going to give it to Pecco. Yeah, I've decked him out a bit, saying he should have been a bit nefarious. He should have been a bit underhand. He should have done some dirty tactics or whatever, but he wasn't. He was the gentleman and he was solid. Pole position, sprint win, Grand Prix win again. And what was it? Was this 11 or 12 races he won in the season? Like level of was it 11? I think it was 11 or 12. And there's only Rossi and Marquez, I think, are the only two other riders to have done this. Absolutely incredible achievement. So I couldn't give it to anyone else but Pecco. So we'll move on to our final award, and that is moment of the weekend. I'll keep the same order. Danny, what was your moment of the weekend?
I mentioned it earlier, was Pecco sliding down the road, already blaming Vinales before he'd even come to a stop.
Nice.
Fair play. Jules, what was yours?
My moment was the Terminator celebration.
That was brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, Terminator is my guilty pleasure, best movie ever. Terminator 2.
Yeah.
And so you could already see this black box and everything. You were wondering what's going on there because it took ages, And then
it did. It took absolutely long.
And then all of a sudden the Terminator tune was played. And I was like, oh, awesome, And then the box opened up, and Jorge Martin comes walking out with the half Terminator mask, but it wasn't caught by the camera properly at all, and he already threw it off. So it was a lovely homage, but poorly registered by the director. But
Could I just say, Jules, how long that celebration took for him to come out of that bit? I was expecting him to come out in full makeup like Arnie out. Yeah. I was really expecting something impressive. So when he come out and he'd got half a mask just stuck on his head, I was super disappointed. Like, where is this amazing makeup I was expecting? The celebration when obviously it blew open was incredible, but I just thought, what a blooming waste I've sat here all that time for. Looked like a 3-year-old's Halloween outfit.
I had the exact same thing because it took so long. I thought, he's going to come out with this, this red lead eye or something, This is going to be amazing. But fair play, fair play for the efforts.
You can just imagine what was going on inside that box. They're like, come on, Jorge, we need to go. It's like, the more you rush me, the longer it will take. He's doing the thing and trying to. But I love the choreographer. He did the fake gun thing and it blew the box up. I didn't expect that. That was super cool. So yeah, it took a bit too long, and the Red Bull, downing half a can of Red Bull before littering as well. That didn't go down well. That's not setting a good example. But anyway, yeah. So that was pretty cool. That was your moment of the weekend. My moment of the weekend was actually on the warm-up lap of the Grand Prix, and it was David Tadotse going with was it Gino Borsoi from Pramac, and he saw the team managers, and that was so cool to see. He grabbed his face, he was laughing and joking with him, and he was like, right, it's two of our teams against each other, but it was done in such a friendly and like respectful way. That was so nice to see. They were both really, really sort of going at it. And again, David Tadotse, Tadotse and Delange and everyone from Ducati, course, like the factory team was straight into Pramac, congratulating afterwards. And they were laughing with him even before the race started. It seemed like they were resigned. They kind of knew it was coming, but I just love that. The way they were doing it, and in a jokey way, it was so nice to see with all the tension. I mean, could you imagine, and I haven't actually got one in it at all yet, so I'm going to get a double Formula One reference in so I don't get into too much trouble. Could you imagine, like, Christian Horner and Toto Wolff or something from Formula One, like being that honourable before the race start of a championship showdown? It's just like, no, you can't. So that was super, super cool to see. So what also would be cool to see is some of our panelists on social media. So Danny, where should people follow you?
You can follow me on Twitter on Danny Henney F1.
Nice one. And Jules, where should people follow you?
Yeah, I am one of the millions who has tried to go to Blue Sky this week. So
sheep.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's going to be something. Apparently it is. So if you're on there, you can find me with the, I don't know if it's called handle, but it's Jules on Racing. And on Twitter, you can find me at Jules Seegers with SEE.
Awesome. I'm a dinosaur, so I haven't gone over to Blue Sky as of yet. I'm still getting my head around Twitter. So you can follow me at Car Power F1 on Twitter, but I'll prefer it if you follow the show page, which is at Missed Apex Moto on Twitter. Again, please feel welcome to send us any feedback at missedapexmoto@gmail.com. We'll be taking a small break to recover from an absolutely epic year, but we will be back to deliver you some off-season content. We've got a few cool ideas. We're going to do maybe some season previews. We're going to look back at maybe some older seasons, some of our favorite historic rides, and maybe we might even have some tech shows to talk about our favorite technology from some of our old previous MotoGP bikes. But tech shows are always good for the niche of you. So
yeah, I'm joking.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for our listeners, and thank you very much for being with us all year, all season on an incredible journey. So we'll be back in a few weeks for some off-season content for you. But as ever, thank you for listening to Mr. Apex MotoGP.